So I recently watched the movie Napoleon. I was hanging out with one of my brothers and we watched the movie, and watching that movie, it reminded me of a conversation that I started having a couple of years ago with a few of my friends. And that conversation is, what is the mindset of a king? It's become really trendy and popular in our society, our culture, to talk about, being a king, mindset of a king, I'm a king, and any kind of little variation of that, right? We're kings and queens. And I was hearing that so much in society, in culture, that one day I sat down and I asked myself, what would it really be like to be a king? When we watch movies, read books, I think we very easily and kind of even naturally romanticize the idea of being a king, right? You're bossing people around, you're sitting on a throne, you're powerful, you got an army, you got power, you rule the lands, etc., 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 right? But I really started to think about what would the realities be of kingship day to day. In what ways, if I were a king in the olden days, in the olden times, in what ways do I think now that I couldn't think back then because I wouldn't have the luxury of it, and so forth. And a few thoughts dawned on me. One is that being a good king, it would be such a crippling, overwhelming, bone-crushing responsibility. Like, let me put it to you this way. The glory of a king is in how well his citizens in his kingdom are doing overall. So are most of the people who are the subjects of the king, citizens in his kingdom, are they doing well? Financially, resources-wise, health-wise, right? Just generally life-wise. The glory of a king and the measure of a king is how well is he doing as a king, meaning how well are all his people doing. So imagine living a life where you wake up every day and you are responsible for hundreds of thousands or millions of people. And because you wear the crown, you are the final say-so. It's not a democracy, right? It's not some sort of a representative republic, etc. You're the king. And the reason why I was doing this mental exercise is because I wanted to see where were there gaps in my own thinking, the ways I was showing up in life, compared to how I would need to be showing up in life if I were to somehow wake up tomorrow and in some fantastical scenario be the king of a kingdom. And the first thing that dawned on me is the level of responsibility that I would have. And so if you apply it to yourself today on a modern day-to-day basis, the level of selfishness and individualism that most of us live with and think with, especially in the Western culture, is very, very far away from the posture that you would find yourself in mentally if you were a good king, because you're going to constantly be thinking about all of your citizens, their welfare. So now how do you apply that to today in your life? You would constantly be thinking, if you're truly a king nowadays, you're constantly thinking about the welfare of all your family, immediate and extended, your friends, your community, your town, your city, your job. If you truly are thinking like a king, if you're truly a king, I'm a king, man. If you're really a king and you're a good one, you are taking responsibility for everybody's welfare and betterment around you in your life. And you're most likely putting yourself dang near last. You couldn't be a good king otherwise, I don't think. And then this led me to a second observation and conclusion. Do you realize how tiring it would be to be a king? Because you're constantly limited by the effectiveness of all the people that you work with. Because really the only way that you can accomplish things as a king is through the effectiveness of the people that work with you and for you. Your generals, your advisors, the people you've appointed to different offices, right? So you're constantly going to find yourself in a role where you're trying to empower people, educate people, elevate people, help them become more confident, right? Because the better they are all individually, then the more effective you're going to be in effecting your will, your vision. And what will happen is you're going to constantly have to deal with selfish people, ignorant people, lazy, unmotivated people, all kinds of people that don't necessarily have the best characteristics or qualities. And you don't have the luxury of being reactive and emotional. You have to find a way to build consensus, get buy-in, right? Get cooperation, get collaboration, especially if you're a good king, because you can't just constantly threaten beheading, right? So do you see how if you're truly thinking like a king, you're constantly results-oriented, and very rarely do you have the luxury of writing people off, right? Or having the luxury of being emotional and reactive to people's bullshit and ego and pettiness and small-mindedness. You have to find a way to work with them and get them to work. I'm just going to drop those two things and wrap this video up. This is more just like a philosophical fun video. But if you've ever thought about, I would have made a good king back in the day. Or if you ever do think to yourself, I'm a king. I do not discourage that. You should esteem yourself highly. You should deem yourself worthy of greatness. You should. But really think about what it would take to be a king. Like really think about what the reality of being a king would be to day, what the responsibilities would be, what kind of luxuries could you not afford in terms of thinking? Like what would you not have the luxury of being able to be or think? Like for example, you can't be emotionally reactive and easily frustrated as a king. Not if you want to be a good one, an effective one, a powerful one. So I know that nowadays it's popular to say, we're kings and queens, treat yourself like a king. If you're not treated like a king, then they don't belong in your life, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that's all fine. But if you're going to say that, really think about, take an hour, have a coffee, have a tea, smoke a cigar, whatever you do. And just really think about, I wake up tomorrow and I've got to lead an empire. What's the first thing that you know about leadership? What's the first thing you know about sacrifice? What's the first thing you know about true patience? What's the first thing that you know about taking responsibility for, even dozens of people's lives around you? They're not necessarily your responsibility, but you just simply take responsibility for every family member you have, immediate and extended, your friends, right? Your coworkers, people in your town, your community, and you just go about trying to find ways to improve their lives and make their lives better. Because that's the mind of a good king. I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on what the mind of a king is. Comment below.